So we actually decided to do it in Morocco. It wasn't an intentional thing, it was actually purely by accident. We were living out there, or like travelling there a few years ago, and we actually saw the situation firsthand. We were really affected by the situation there. So we decided to actually start a charity, and we were actually just like concentrating in Morocco. And to be actually honest, if we had started in Egypt, I think it probably would have been a lot more difficult to actually work in Egypt. The Moroccan government is a lot more progressive than the old Egyptian regime, so it's a lot more easier to actually work with organisations out there, just because Morocco has actually recognised that there is a problem, and they are actually taking steps towards towards actually improving the situation, to actually raising awareness as well. So it wasn't an intentional thing. I do love Egypt. I don't hate Egypt, I love Morocco, but it was just purely by accident. And we are an organisation working in North Africa, so in a few years' time, when we do actually expand, we do hope to go to Egypt and other countries in North Africa as well. All the founders are actually non-Moroccans, but now, like, thankfully, we've had some more Moroccans actually on board, and they are actually trustees now. I think in terms of actually raising awareness in the UK, we were actually always wanting to raise awareness about the situation of the street children to everybody. We didn't just want to limit it to the Moroccan community. And I think, I mean, like, thankfully in the last probably year, we have had a lot more Moroccan support from the UK. So it is actually, you know, expanding. Financially, no, not yet.
Sorry, could I just add to that comment? Sorry,
this is the director of Walou.
Sorry, hi, my name's Delia. I just wanted to mention about the Moroccan community, and we haven't really pushed to try and access them. And you should, as a charity, normally if you're a Palestinian charity, you do access the expat community within the country that you're working in, or if you're an Egyptian charity, then the Egyptians get on board. But regardless of that, I mean, we have panel members here who are working with street children in India and in Kenya, and we just came back from a conference in Geneva with all different charities and organisations. And this is a global issue, and whether the support comes, whether you're Moroccan, I mean, sorry, can I just see a show of hands? Who's Moroccan here? Wow, I'm out today. Okay, forget that. No, the point is, it's not about being Moroccan, it's a humanitarian issue. They're children. When you see the children, when you speak to the children, and you saw the film at the end, and the boy, he's saying, now I dream for nothing, and I'm just looking after myself. You're not watching that and thinking, well, he's Moroccan, you know, I'm going to go and help Egypt now. It's just a child.
Yeah,
so it's
purely
anyone can get involved, and anyone can volunteer.
Yeah.
As a point I'd like to make about the choice of countries where you work, because in the Railway Children we used to work in about 10 different countries, and we had to try to actually, in order to work more closely with government, we had to actually concentrate and become real experts in certain areas. And yes, there are countries like Brazil and India where the problem is enormous and huge, and it's been ignored for donkey's years, which is why it's grown so big now. One of the advantages sometimes of choosing a country where there aren't so many street children is you can actually get in at the beginning and start to preempt and start to stop the actual problem getting out of hand. When Railway Children chose to work in East Africa, Kenya has an enormous problem. It's grown, it's been there for a number of years. Tanzania next door has a much smaller problem, but it's growing. And we actually decided that we would go to Tanzania as well as Nairobi, because by working closely with a minister from the government there who is actually interested, we think that a big push there might actually stop the problem getting out of hand and be controllable. So it is worth actually looking at some countries which have a small but growing problem and actually stop it really getting out of hand in the first place.
What we actually did is, when we initially started, we went out there and we researched a lot into all the different organisations working in Morocco. And what we actually wanted to do is we wanted to go with an organisation that had similar aims and objectives as we do. We didn't just want to go with an organisation that has a roof over these children's heads and will just clothe and feed them. We are like working to invest in their future, so we wanted to work with an organisation that was like willing to work with a psychologist, someone that wanted to actually progressively help these children in the long term. In terms of actually deciding which organisations to work with, the two organisations that we actually work with, we actually went through quite a vigorous screening process. So we had, I mean, without going into too much like detail, but we went through all the bank statements. We had everything. Okay. I mean, we had to do a due diligence basically on them. So we got all the trustees' names. We had to do a security list just to check that they're not on any security list. We had to go through the funding just to see who actually like funds them, where they actually go. And thankfully, the two organisations that we do work with, they are really strict on that. They do keep receipts from what we've actually given them the money for, so we know exactly where the money is actually going. So we are quite strict with that, and we have gone through the process. So I mean, we wouldn't just walk into an organisation and give them money. We would be doing all the background research, and then we'd actually be visiting. I mean, we actually go out 2 or 3 times a year as trustees. So we always follow up. There's always one of us going, and it's normally three times a year. So we always make sure.
All access.
In terms of the funding, yeah, so we know exactly where the money is going to. I mean, we actually work on 100% no admin, so all of us are actually volunteers who work for the organisation. So all the money that actually comes into the charity, 100% of it will actually go to helping the street children, to actually helping these organisations that we work with. And I mean, obviously we are like part of the charity commission, so there is reports that come out that we have to do each year. So everyone has access to those as well, so you can actually see how much money was spent on that organisation. But in terms of the corruption in Morocco, we have done a lot of checks, probably a lot more than is like necessary. But obviously, as the donors, we want to make sure that all the money is going there and it's going there for legit reasons as well.
Sorry. I think it's quite interesting what she's brought up, because corruption is like a disease in Africa. It's not only in Morocco.
Yeah.
When you're
It's not only in Africa.
when you're talking about getting receipts, how do you ensure? Because I have background working for an international NGO. I'll not mention the name, but I want you to realize that most of these organizations, most of you people from here, when you fund organizations in Africa, there are only very few, and I'm not saying this because I know him, but I know the way their system works. So it is, with their system, I'm comfortable with them. But I'll tell you, when you people work with people from Africa, you assume that you're going to get the receipt. You will get the receipt that you want to get. But it doesn't mean that that receipt represents what was done.
Yeah.
Do you get my point?
Yeah. I
So-
mean, sorry.
And apart from that, yeah, most of these big organizations, for example, like European Union, when they have a branch, for example, I'm just giving an example, like in Kenya, it's not the Europeans working in Kenya, they have employed the Kenyans there.
Yeah.
So that syndrome becomes within the system.
Yeah.
It becomes very difficult.
Mm.
So when you're saying, the only part that I'm comfortable is when you say that you go there. But
Yeah,
when you
we
go
actually-
there, do you tell them that you're coming? Because that's another thing I
Yeah.
want you to realize. 'Cause I've worked
Mm.
with organizations whereby, you know, the directors from abroad,
Yeah.
they tell us that they're coming.
Yeah.
And they will only be taken to those places that we know things are
Yeah,
right.
I know. I mean, we actually have specific programs that we actually fund. So we don't actually fund an organisation as such. We actually fund specific projects in that organisation. So we have our like child sponsorship program, which is we know how many children we're actually funding for the year, how much the basic needs of that child costs. So in terms of that, we know 100% of that money is going there. We actually have 2 trustees who actually live in Morocco, and they're actually Moroccan. So they're also a point of contact that we can always let them know, and they will always be actually going into the organisations from time to time as well.
Can I make a comment on this from not just Africa? There are enormous problems we've had in India with exactly the same problem, you know, same problems of corruption and so forth. And we actually do a risk assessment, which we all have to do. And the two big risks that we have are, one is embezzlement or corruption on the financial side. The other one that we're that we have to watch very carefully is child abuse, and that the people who are working with the children, because these are terribly vulnerable children, and it's only too easy for, or can be easy for people who would have the wrong motives to get involved. We found in India and other countries where we're now working that it has to be a mixture of the things that are said. It does help to have people from the countries concerned because they know the language, they know the culture. One of the ways in which we uncovered some corruption in India was when we first hired a Bengali person who was actually able to go and not just talk to the director of the program or the senior managers there, but was actually able to go and talk to the teachers, the street workers and the children. And in the process of doing that, found some discrepancies between what the children were saying and what the organisation was saying. In fact, we got some signs pretty early on that things weren't right, because we saw how unhappy the director was when we started talking to the children. Having UK people, trustees, to go out and see and visit, having supervisors come locally who spend not just a day but a week with the organisation, actually, so it's a real partnership and you're agreeing things together, you're agreeing objectives together so they feel part of you, is important. But it's not, you have to have all these strands, I think, and it sounds very much as though you have it.
Okay, go. Yeah.
My name is Asma Sharif. I'm the Programme Manager at the Economist Group. First of all, I just wanted to say, sort of, to support what May and what Delia and what Heather were saying. I think with charity there has to be an element of faith. You can't assume that the people that you're working with are, like you said, out to embezzle or they're going to hurt the children. There's only so many checks you can do apart from standing there all day watching what they do. I think you have to take it in good faith a lot of the time that they do want to help people. And you know, you have to be cynical, yes, because there is corruption, but at the same time, you know, where do you draw the line? Because you'd never support anyone if that was the case.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to ask you is, you said that it's sort of a relatively recent problem of street children in Morocco, but you were saying that in maybe Egypt or Kenya there are second or third generation families of street children. Why do you think this is? Why 20 years ago were there street children, and if so, if there weren't, why not? And why are there now?
In Egypt, the situation has been there a lot longer, I think probably just because of the population and also just because Egypt is concentrated in like cities. Most of, I think probably about 80–90% of the population of Egypt is actually in Cairo. So that's probably one of the main reasons that the incidence of street children is quite new in Morocco. It's probably about maybe like 15–20 years. It's not
yeah, maybe when children, when the rate of children coming to the streets grows and the measures are not put in place to stop the trend, the number keep on increasing, and even girls, the girl child also, the number increases in the streets. There is one thing that is very clear about the street children, the boys and the girls. The girls normally are more vulnerable, especially they lack education and they lack information, and they are more likely to involve in sexual work to survive. That would be one of their way of surviving in the streets. As the boys become potters, as the boy do other work, the girls would most likely get into sex work to earn a living. And without information and education, they become vulnerable to HIV infections and unwanted pregnancies. And that is what gives, what produces the second generation babies in the streets. That is what brings about the street families. So if the street children trend is in the increase and it is not stopped, then definitely it will result into street families. You see, there is the age limit. The children who are 16 years and 17 years can work if that is what they choose to do, and they don't want to go into formal education, and they don't want non-formal education. The better thing to do about it is to negotiate for good conditions of work and good pay, and let them learn about savings, and in the process make good rapport with them, access them to trainings in business, and eventually they can translate into good business people. But there are smaller children who should be able to access education. That one can be done in two ways. There is prosecuting. The law is very clear. The United Nations on the Conventions on the Rights of the Child, which my colleague has talked about, has been domesticated by most countries of the world. They have come up with national children policies, national children acts. Like in Kenya, we have the Children Act 2001. Now, it is a domestication of the UNCRC and the African Charter on the Rights and the Welfare of the Child. It prohibits harmful child labor. So children who are below 15 years of age and are able to still access formal or non-formal education, it is desirable to help them get into education. So we use two ways. We use sensitization of the people barring them, the push factors, the men and the women engaging them so that they're not able to go to school. And also helping the children to understand that it is their right to go to school, it is good for them, and giving them an opportunity to go to school.